Well, good evening, everybody. Happy Storytime Tuesday. Ah, that's right. Another Storytime Tuesday that you and I get to spend together. This week, we continue our adventures in the land of Xanth. Xanth, where we have gone back in time 800 long years. Well, we've sort of gone back in time 800 long years. We have journeyed into a tapestry. We journeyed into the tapestry so that way we could, well, I say we, but we've journeyed into the tapestry so that Dor can find a potion to be able to bring the Zombie King or Jonathan back to life. And in order to do so, he has to get with the Zombie King. And so he has gone back into the tapestry. He's trying, or he's been adventuring. We found that he accidentally brought a spider with him. And he encounters this gigantic spider. And turns out it was a normal itty bitty spider in his world, but the magic dragged it through into the tapestry with him. So now Jumper, as his name happens to be, is back in the world of the tapestry with Dor. And it's just not really good for him because he's in the land he shouldn't be. But hey, it's been great for Dor because he has an ally. Which, because Dor can talk to inanimate objects, he has a cobweb that he's using to communicate with the spider. Isn't that nice? What a wonderful thing. And so they've gone on some journeys and they've been trying to make their way to Castle Roogna because that's where they figure knowledge of where the zombie master would be. The zombie master is where they have to go to get the recipe for the potion that would allow Jonathan the zombie to become human again. So they've journeyed, they've fought things, they've done things, and now they're going to be making their way finally to Castle Roogna. Along the way, they found themselves a maiden. And it turns out that it's Millie the maid. Millie the maid, who happens to be, in the future at least, the ghost Millie, who will be the one that it's the whole reason why Dor is on this quest, is to help to heal Jonathan for Millie the maid. So it's a whole thing. Um, and so they met up with Millie. Great. What a wonderful thing that is, right? And so it's been fun, it's been interesting, and they've just managed to get over a river filled with monsters to get to the land that Castle Roogna is supposed to reside on. And so that's where we start our story for this evening. Of course, if you have missed any of the chapters, you can go and check them out on youtube.com/@SirArminius. All of those previous chapters are there for your listening pleasure. The first two books of the Xanth series, as well as any of the chapters in Castle Roogna that we have already read. And now we'll go ahead and get ourselves started into Castle Roogna for the evening. And we'll be starting into Chapter 5. So, of course, that means Chapters 1 through 4 are up on YouTube. So sit back, everybody, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive into Castle Roogna. Chapter 5. They found a safe tree to hang from for the rest of the night, then resumed their trek in the morning. The local sticks and stones were as helpful as usual, and they located Castle Roogna without difficulty about noon. Dor was able to recognize the general lay of the land, but the vegetation was all different. There was no orchard. Instead, there were a number of predaceous plants, and the castle was only half complete. Dor had seen Castle Roogna many times, but in this changed situation, it stood out like a completely novel structure. It was tall, the largest castle in all the land of Xanth, and its outer ramparts were the tallest and most massive. It was roughly square, about 100 feet on a side, and the walls rose 30 feet or more above the moat. It was braced by 4 great towers at the corners, their square outlines projecting halfway out from the main frame, enlarging it and casting stark shadows against the recessed walls. In the center of each side of the castle was a smaller round tower, also projecting out by half its diameter, casting more subtle shadows. Solid battlements surmounted the top. There were no windows or other apertures. In Dor's day, some had been cut, but this was a more adventurous period, and the defenses had to be as strong as possible. Overall, this was as powerful and impressive an edifice as Dor cared to imagine. But the inner structure was virtually non-existent. The beautiful palace portion had at this stage to be a mere courtyard. And the north wall lacked its upper courses. The huge stone stair-stepped down in the center, and the round support tower was incomplete. A herd of centaurs was laboring on this section, using hoists and massive cables and sheer brute force to draw the blocks to the top. They worked with somewhat less efficiency and conviction than Dor would have expected, based on his knowledge of the centaurs of his own day. They looked rougher, too, as if the human and equine sections were imperfectly joined. Dor was reminded that not only had new species risen in 800 years, the old ones had suffered refinement. Dor marched up to the centaur supervisor, who stood outside the moat, near a crude wooden scaffold supporting the next block to be hoisted. He was sweating as he trotted back and forth, calling out instructions to the pulley crew, trying to maneuver the stone up without cracking into the existing wall. Horseflies buzzed annoyingly about his hindquarters. Not the big flying horse variety, but the little horse-biting variety. They buzzed off quickly when Jumper came near, but the centaur didn't notice. Where is King Roogna?" Dor inquired as the centaur paused to give him a harried glance. "Go find him yourself," the surly creature retorted brusquely. "Can't you see we're busy here?" The centaurs of Dor's time were generally the soul of courtesy, except when aroused. One notable exception was Uncle Chester, sire of Dor's centaur playmate, Chet. This centaur supervisor was reminiscent of Chester, and the other members of this herd resembled him too. Chester must have been a throwback to this original type. Ugly of facial feature, handsome of posterior, powerfully constructed, surly of disposition, yet a creature of sterling qualities once its confidence was won. Dor and his party retreated. This was obviously not the occasion to bug the centaurs. "Stone, where is King Roogna?" Dor inquired of a section of a block that had not yet been transported across the moat. "He resides in a temporary hut south of here," the stone responded. As Dor had suspected, there would have to be a lot more work on the castle before it was habitable for a king, though in the event of war the inner court should be safe enough for camping. No one would choose to live there while the centaurs were hoisting massive rocks about. They went south. Dor was tempted to make a detour to the spot where his cottage cheese existed in his own day, but resisted. There would be nothing there. They came across a hut adapted from a large pumpkin, set in a small but neat yard. A solid, graying man in soiled shorts was contemplating a chocolate cherry tree while chewing on the fruit, evidently a gardener sampling the product. The man hailed them without waiting for an introduction. "Welcome, travelers. Come, have a cherry while they are available." The three stopped. Dor plucked a cherry and found it excellent, a delicious outer coating of sweet brown chocolate, a firm cherry interior with a liquid center. Millie liked the fruit too. "Better than candied cave lice," she opined. Jumper was too polite to demur, but evidently had another opinion. "Pretend it is a swollen tick," Dor suggested in a low voice. The spider waved a foreleg, acquiescing. "Well, let's try it again," the gardener said. "I'm having some difficulty with this one." He concentrated on the tree. Nothing happened. "Are you trying to do a spell?" Dor inquired, plucking another cherry. "To add fertilizer to it or something?" No. The centaurs provide plenty of fertilizer. As a matter of fact..." The man's eyes widened, startled. "Hold that cherry a moment, sir, if you please. Don't bite into it." Dor paused, cherry near mouth. The first had been so good, he was about to have the gardener deny him the second so arbitrarily. He looked at the fruit. It lacked the chocolate covering, and its surface was bright red and hard. "I won't," he agreed. "This must be a bad one." He flipped it away. "Don't!" the man cried, too late. "That's a..." There was an explosion nearby. Millie screamed. The noise was deafening, and heat blasted at them. All four of them stumbled to the side, away from the blast. The concussion subsided. Dor looked around dazedly. There was a wisp of smoke rising from the vicinity of the explosion. "What was that?" Dor asked, shaken. He discovered he had his sword in hand, and put it away self-consciously. "The cherry bomb you threw," the gardener said. "Lucky you did not bite into it." "The cherry? That was a chocolate cherry from this..." Dor looked at the tree. "Why, those are cherry bombs now. How..." "This must be King Roogna," Millie offered. "We didn't recognize him." Nonplussed, Dor worked it out. He had pictured King Roogna as a man somewhat like King Trent, polished, intelligent, commanding of demeanor, a man nobody would care to take lightly. But of course, the folklore of 800 years would clothe the magician in larger-than-life grandeur. It was not a person's appearance that counted in Xanth. It was his magic talent. So this pudgy, informal, gardener-type man with the gentle manner and thinning graying hair and sweaty armpits, unprepossessing, this could indeed be the king. This tree, he changed it from chocolate cherry to cherry bomb. Magician King Roogna's talent was adapting magic to his purpose. Was? The king inquired, raising a dust-smeared eyebrow. You'd been thinking of the historical figure, who was, of course, contemporary in the tapestry world. Is, your majesty. He started to bow, changed his mind in mid-motion, started to kneel, changed his mind again, and found himself dissolving in confusion. The king set a firm, friendly hand on his shoulder. Be at ease, warrior. Had I desired obeisance, I would have made it known at the outset. It is my talent that sets me apart, rather than my office. In fact, my office is insecure at the moment. My troops are all on furlough because we have no quarters yet for them, and difficulties plague the construction of my castle. So pretension would ill befit me, were I inclined toward it. Yes, your majesty. The king contemplated him. I gather you are from Mundania, though you seem to have had some garbled account of Xanth. He glanced at Millie. And the young lady has the aspect of the West Stockade. They do raise some pretty fruits there. He looked at Jumper. And this person. I don't believe I have encountered a jumping spider of your magnitude before, sir. Is it an enchantment? He called me sir, Jumper cluttered. Is a king supposed to do that? A king, Roogna said firmly, can do just about anything he chooses. Preferably, he chooses to rule well. I note your voice is translated by a web on the warrior's shoulder. His aspect hardened, and he began to suggest the manner Dor had expected in a king. This interests me. There appears to be unusual magic here. Yes, your majesty, Dor said quickly. There is considerable enchantment here, but it is hard to explain. All magic is hard to explain, Roogna said. He makes things talk, Millie said helpfully. The sticks and stones don't break his bones. They talk to him. And walls and water and things. That's how we found our way here. A mundane magician? Roogna asked. This is a virtual contradiction in terms. I said it was hard to explain, your majesty, Dor said awkwardly. A figure approached, a compact, squarish man of the king's generation, with a slightly crooked smile. Do I smell something interesting, Roogna? He inquired. You do indeed, Murphy. The king replied. Here, let me introduce ourselves more adequately. I am Magician Roogna, Proterm King. My talent is the adaptation of living magic to my purpose. He looked meaningfully at Dor. I am Dor, Magician Dor. My talent is communication with the inanimate. Then, in case that wasn't clear, he added, I talk to things. The king prompted Millie with another glance. I am Millie the maid, an innocent girl of the West Stockade village, she said. My talent is... She blushed delicately, and her talent manifested strongly. Sex appeal. On around the circle. I am Phidippus variegatus of the family Jumper the spider for short, Jumper chittered. My talent, like that of all my kind, is silk. At last it came to the newcomer. And I am Magician Murphy. My talent is making things go wrong. I am the chief obstacle to Roogna's power, and his rival for dominance in Xanth. Dor's mouth dropped open. You are the enemy magician? Right here with the king? King Roogna laughed. What better place? It is true we oppose each other, but this is a matter of politics. Magicians, as a rule, do not practice their talents directly on each other. We prefer to manifest our powers more politely. Murphy and I are two of the three magicians extant. The third has no interest in politics, so we two are the rivals for power in Xanth. We're trying our strength in this manner. If I can succeed in completing Castle Roogna before the year is out, Murphy will yield me uncontested title to the throne. If I fail, I will abdicate the throne, and since there is no other magician suitable for the office, the anarchy that follows will likely foster Murphy as the dominant figure. Meanwhile, we share the camaraderie of our status. It is an equitable arrangement. But Dor was appalled. You treat the welfare of the whole land of Xanth as if it were a game. The king shook his head gravely. No game, Magician Dor. We are absolutely serious. But we also indulge ourselves in honor. If one of us can prevail in war, he can surely do it by humane rules of conduct. This is warfare of the civilized kind. Jumper chittered. There is warfare of the uncivilized kind approaching, the web translated. The harpies and the goblins are massing their forces to exterminate each other. Murphy smiled. Ah, you betray my secret, Spider. If anything can go wrong, it will, Dor said. You mean the war between monsters is your doing? By no means, magician, the enemy demurred. The war of monsters has roots going well back before our time, and no doubt will continue long after our time. My talent merely encourages the most violent outbreak at the least convenient time for Roogna. And we need hardly guess where the two armies will randomly meet, King Roogna exclaimed, his gaze turning northward toward the incomplete castle. I had hoped it would be a surprise, Murphy admitted ruefully. That would prevent you from calling back your troops in time to defend the castle. But for the intrusion of these visitors, it might have been unforeshadowed. So, your talent fouled you this time, Millie said. Perhaps an eddy current, Jumper chittered. My talent is not proof against the influence of other magicians, Murphy said. The ramifications of the talents of magician caliber extend well beyond the apparent aspects. If another magician were to oppose me, my talent would feel the impact, regardless of the specific nature of the opposing talent. And it seems another magician has indeed entered the picture. It will take time to comprehend the significance of this new element. That was an apt remark. Dor had entered the picture literally, for this was the tapestry, the picture world. Murphy studied Dor with a certain disquieting intensity. I would like to get to know you better, sir. Would you care to accept my hospitality for the duration of your stay here, or until we all hie into the castle to avoid the ravages of the monsters? We had thought there were no unknown magicians in Zant at this time. Sir? Jumper chittered. He was still having a problem with this word, having seen its power. But you are the enemy, Dor protested. Oh, go with him, Roogna said. I lack proper facilities for 3, at the moment, though soon the castle will be in order. The maid can stay with my wife, and the spider, I dare say, would be happiest hanging from a tree. I assure you Murphy will not hurt you, Dor. It is his prerogative, by the rules of our contest, to be given opportunity to fathom significant new elements, particularly if they add to the strength of my position. I have a similar privilege to inspect his allies. You may both rejoin me and your companions for the evening repast. Somewhat bemused, Dor went with Murphy. I don't understand this business, magician. You act as if you and King Roogna are friends. We are peers. That's not the same as friends, but it will do. We have no others except the Zombie Master, and he is not one to associate with on this basis. There is, of course, Neo-Sorceress Vadni, who would have assisted me had I agreed to marry her, but I declined, and so she joined the king. But she is not a dominant figure, so if we desire the companionship of our level, we must seek it in each other, and now, it seems, in you. I am extremely curious about you, Dor. This was awkward. I am from a far land. Obviously. I had not been aware that any magicians resided in Mundania. Well, I'm not really from Mundania. But could he afford to tell the whole truth? Don't tell me. Let me guess. Not from Mundania, so it must be somewhere in Xanth. North of the Gap? You remember the Gap? Shouldn't I? I guess it's all right. My people have trouble remembering the Gap sometimes. Strange. The Gap is most memorable. So, you're south of it? Not exactly. You see, Let's see your nature. Can you make this jewel talk? Murphy held up a glittering emerald. What is your nature? Dor asked the stone. What are you worth? What is your secret? I am glass, the jewel responded. A fake. I am worth almost nothing. The magician has dozens like me to give to greedy fools for their support. Murphy raised an expressive eyebrow. But you are not fake, Dor. There must be few secrets hidden from you. A remarkable informational talent. Yes. So, the mystery expands. How could a fool magician have remained concealed so long? Roogna and I once harnessed a magic sniffer and surveyed this whole region. That was how the site for the castle was selected. There is a high concentration of useful magic here, and overall the effect is very strong. If the source of all magic is not in this vicinity, it cannot be far from it. So we found enchantment aplenty, but no magicians. Yet, in our experience, no really strong magic emerges from the hinterland. How could a man of mundane aspect, with a warrior's reflexes, turn up suddenly with such a talent? It hardly seems possible. Dor shrugged. In fact, I suspect it is impossible. Or rather, it must be the result of magic beyond our present comprehension. Some special enchantment. He broke off, lifting one finger expressively. An anachronism. That would account for it. You are from the land of Xanth, in another time. Yes, Dor said. Murphy was no fool. Not the past, surely, for there is no record of such a talent historically. Of course, many of the ancient records have been lost, owing to waves and such. Still, talents tend to grow more sophisticated with time, and yours is quite sophisticated. So it must be the future. How far? The truth could not be concealed from this clever man. 800 years, Dor admitted. They had arrived at Murphy's tent. Come in, have a drink of cider. A fine sweet cider press just fruited in my yard, and tell me all about it. But I'm not on your side, Dor blurted. I want King Roogna to win. Naturally you do. All the right-thinking people do. Fortunately for me, there are as many wrong-thinking people as right-thinkers. But surely you must realize that ignorance serves my purpose, not his. Only the orderly categorization of facts can promote a stable kingdom. Then why do you want this information? Are you going to try to do something to me? Dor's hand touched his sword. Magicians do not act against magicians, Murphy reminded him. Not directly. I mean you no personal mischief. Rather, I am trying to determine the impact and meaning of your presence here. The addition of another full magician to the equation could change the outcome of our contest. If your force is sufficient to tip the balance in Roogna's favor, and I cannot reverse it, then I would have to concede the throne to him without further ado, and save us all much torment. Therefore, it behooves both Roogna and me to ascertain your nature, early and accurately. Why do you think he sent you with me? You two are the strangest enemies I ever saw. I can't follow the convolutions of your game. We merely abide by the rules. Without rules, there is no game. Murphy handed him a glass of cider. Tell me the whole story, Dor, and we shall ascertain how your presence affects our situation. You will be welcome, then, to explain it to the king. Dor seemed to have no choice. He wished Jumper were here to advise him, or Grunny the Golem. He just didn't have confidence in his own judgment. Yet he always felt most at home with the truth. So he told the evil magician as much of the story as he could organize. His quest to help restore a zombie, the inclusion of Jumper in the spell, the adventure within the tapestry. No problem about locating the zombie master, Murphy said. The problem is, he won't help you. But only he knows the secret of restoring zombies. That's the whole purpose in my... He may know, Murphy said, but he won't tell. He does nothing for anyone. That is why he lives alone. I still have to ask him, Dor said stubbornly. Meanwhile, what about you? Now that you know King Roogna will complete the castle. That is indeed a ponderous matter. Yet there are several considerations. One is that what you say may not be true. Dor was stung. His body's hand, responsive in its fashion to his mood, reached over his shoulder for the sword. Murphy held up a hand, unalarmed. You sound so uncertain, yet your body reacts so aggressively. This corroborates your story, of course. Do not force me to use my magic against you. You would suffer mishap before ever you brought your weapon to bear. I did not call you a liar. I merely conjecture that you could be misinformed. History is notorious for misinformation. That castle you knew could have been built a century later and given the name of Roogna to lend verisimilitude to the new order. How would you know? Very what? Dor asked, confused. Verisimilitude. Realism. To make it seem likely and true. Dor was startled. A castle built much later, called Roogna. He had never thought of that. But there are other approaches, Murphy continued. Assume your version of history is accurate, as indeed it may be. Now you have returned. What can you do except change your history? In which case your presence can at best be neutral, and at worst reverse the outcome of the present competition between Roogna and Murphy. So, your excursion may be an auspicious omen for me. I hardly mean to interfere with you. I think it may be my talent that brought you here, to foul up Roogna. Dor was startled again. Himself? An agent of the enemy? Yet it was suddenly all too plausible. But I rather suspect, Murphy continued, that you will in fact prove unable to change history in any significant respect. I visualize it as a protean thing, yielding to specific imperatives, yet always reasserting itself when the pressure abates. I doubt anything you can do will have impact after you depart. It will be an interesting phenomenon to watch, however. Dor was silent. This magician had neutralized him thoroughly, expertly, without doing a thing except talk. The worst of it was, he was very much afraid that Murphy was correct. The more Dor might try to interfere, here in the tapestry world, the more likely he was to hurt King Roogna's chances. So Dor would have to remain as neutral as possible, lest even his help prove disastrous. They finished their cider and returned to King Roogna. This man is indeed a magician, Murphy announced, but I deem him no threat to my designs, though he aligns himself with you. He will explain as he chooses. The king glanced at Dor inquiringly. It is true, Dor said. He has shown me that any help I may try to render you can have the opposite effect. We don't know that for sure, but it is a risk, so I must remain neutral, to my regret. Dor had surprised himself by making a very adult-sounding statement. Maybe it was Murphy's influence. Very well, the king said. Murphy is many things, but his integrity is unimpeachable. Since you may not help me, may I help you? Only by telling me where to find the zombie master. Oh, you can't get anything from him, the king assured Dor. He helps no one. So Magician Murphy informed me. Yet it is vital that I see him, and after that I shall depart this land. Then wait a few days, until I complete the present phase of the castle. Then I can spare you a guide and a guard. I owe you this in deference to your magician status. The zombie master lives east of here, in the heart of the wilderness. It is difficult to pass. Dor chafed inwardly at the delay, but felt it might be best to accede. He and his friends had had too many narrow escapes already. A guiding guard would help. They rejoined Millie and Jumper. "The king has given me a job!" Millie exclaimed immediately, bouncing and clapping her hands and swinging her hair in such a full circle that it lapped around her face, momentarily concealing it. "As soon as the castle is complete." "If we have time to wait," Jumper chittered, "I should like to recompense the king's hospitality by offering my service for the duration of our stay here." Dor started to protest, realizing that what applied to himself should also apply to the spider. "That is most courteous of you," the king said heartily. "I understand from the young lady that you are adept at hoisting and lowering objects. We have dire need of such ability at the moment. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, you will join my sturdy centaur crew." Murphy glanced meaningfully at Dor. The evil magician was satisfied to make this trial of the validity of his conjecture, and Dor had to be satisfied too. Maybe Murphy was wrong after all. They could not afford to assume he was right, if he were not. So Dor was silent, not wanting to alarm the king or Jumper unnecessarily. Silent, but not at ease. The king served them royally enough with pies from a pie tree he had adapted for this purpose. Pizza, shepherd's, mince, cheese, and pecan pies, washed down with excellent fruit punch from a punch fruit tree. "In my land," Dor remarked, "the king is a transformer. He changes living things into other living things. He can change a man into a tree or a dragon into a toad. How does this differ from your own talent, your majesty?" "A transformer," King Roogna murmured. "That's a potent talent. I cannot change a man into a tree. I can only adapt forms of magic to other purposes. A sleep spell to a truth spell. A chocolate cherry to a cherry bomb. So I would say your king is a more powerful magician than I am." Dor was abashed. "I'm sorry, your majesty. I didn't mean to imply." "You didn't, Dor. I'm not competing with your king for status. Nor am I competing with you. We magicians have a certain camaraderie, as I mentioned. We respect each other's talents. I'd like to meet your king someday, after I have completed the castle." "Which may be never," Murphy said. "Now with him I am competing," the king said good-naturedly, and bit into another piece of pie. Dor said nothing, still having trouble accepting this friendly rivalry facade. In the morning, Jumper reported to the castle construction crew. Dor went along to help translate, since no one else could understand the spider's chittering, and because he was privately concerned about Jumper's possible influence on history, or lack of it. If anything Dor or Jumper did could affect King Roogna's success. Dor shook his head uneasily. King Roogna was busy today, adapting new spells to preserve the roof of the castle, once the construction reached that stage. The magic, it seemed, had to be built right into the castle, otherwise it would not endure. This business of adapting spells, such as the one a water dragon used to prevent the water from dousing its flame, converting that to make an unleakable roof, well, that was certainly something a transformer couldn't do. So King Roogna had no reason to be modest. It was very difficult to compare the strength of talents. But if Jumper's offer of help were only to hurt, they approached the same centaur's supervisor who had brushed them off before. It seemed he had charge of the north wall, the one still under construction. The creature was pacing and fretting about the arrival of additional blocks of stone. It seemed the quarriers had fouled up a spell or two and were running behind schedule. King Roogna would like to have my friend help, Dor said. He can lift stones into place with his silken lines, or climb sheer walls too. A giant bug? The centaur demanded, swishing his tail rapidly back and forth. We don't want his kind among us. But he's here to help. Now the other centaur workers were dismounting from the wall and crowding in close. They loomed uncomfortably large. A centaur standing the height of a man actually had about 6 times the mass of a man. And these stood somewhat taller than Dor, whose present body was a giant among men. We don't associate with no bugs, one cried. Get that weirdo out of here. Nonplussed, Dor turned to Jumper. They don't. I understand, Jumper chittered. I am not their kind. Dor eyed the masked centaurs, who seemed eager for any pretext to take time off from their labors. I don't understand. You can do so much. We don't care if he can throw droppings at the big green moon, one yelled. Get him out of here before we fetch a fly swatter. Dor got angry. You shouldn't talk to him that way. Jumper's not a fly. He eats flies. He can keep all the horse flies away. Bug lover, the supervisor snapped. You're as bad as he is. Now watch I don't pound you both into the ground. Yeah, the other centaurs agreed, stomping their hooves. Jumper chittered. These creatures are hostile. We shall depart. He started off. Dor followed him, but not with docility. With each step he took, his anger grew. They had no right to do that. The king needs help. Yet at the same time he wondered whether this were not for the best. If Jumper were not allowed to participate, Murphy's curse couldn't operate, could it? They could not change history. Soon they were back at the royal tent. The king was outdoors beside a pond, where a small water dragon was captive. The thing was snorting smoke angrily and lashing up a froth with its tail, but Roogna seemed not to be concerned. Now, climb up on this roofing material, he was telling the dragon. Propensity facilitates adaptation. Then he looked up and spied Dor and Jumper. Some problem at the construction site? Dor tried to be civilized, but it burst out of him. The centaurs won't let Jumper work. They say he's different. So I am, Jumper chittered. King Roogna had seemed like an even-tempered, harmless sort of man. Now that changed. He stood up straight and his jaw hardened. I will not have this attitude in my kingdom. He snapped his fingers, and in a moment a flying dragon arrived. A beautiful creature armored in stainless steel, with burnished talons and a long snout suitable for aiming a jet of fire accurately from a distance. Dragon, it seems my work crew is getting bulky. Fetch your contingent and... Jumper chittered violently. No, your majesty, the web translated, almost shedding itself in an effort to transmit the force of the spider's conviction. Do not chastise your workers. They are no more ignorant than my own kind, and they are doing necessary work. I regret I caused disruption. Disruption? By offering to help? The king's brow remained stormy. At least I must chastise them with my magic. Centaurs do not have to have such pretty tails, so useful for swishing away flies. I can adapt them to lizards' tails, useful for slinking along between rocks. That will dampen their overweening arrogance."
No, Jumper still protested. Do not allow the curse to distort your judgment.
Roogna's eyes widened. "Murphy! You're right, of course. This is his doing. If alienophobia could interfere, it does interfere."
Door 2 was startled. That was it, certainly. Magician Murphy had laid a curse on the construction of the castle, and Jumper's offer had triggered it. The centaurs were not really to blame.
"You are a sensible, generous creature," the king said to Jumper. "Since you plead the cause of those who wrong you, I must abate my action. I regret the necessity and the wrong done you, but it seems I cannot take advantage of your kind offer of assistance."
He dismissed the flying dragon with a kingly, off-handed gesture.
"The centaurs are allies, not servants. They labor on the castle because they are most proficient at this sort of construction. I have done return favors for them. I regret that I let my temper slip. Please, feel free to use my facilities until I can arrange for your escort. Meanwhile, you are welcome to watch me operate here, though I hope you will not interrupt my concentration with foolish questions."
They settled down to watch the king. Dor was quite curious about the actual mechanism for adapting a spell. Did the king just command it, as Dor commanded objects to speak? Or was it a silent effort of will? But hardly had Roogna gotten the bulky water dragon placed before a messenger imp ran up.
"King, sir, there's been a foul-up at the construction site. The wrong spell was on the building blocks, and they're pushing each other apart instead of pulling themselves together."
"The wrong spell?" Roogna roared indignantly. "I adapted that spell myself only last week."
There followed a brief discussion. It turned out that a full course of blocks had been laid in the wrong place, causing their spells to conflict with those of the next course instead of meshing. Someone had fouled up, and the error had not been caught in time. They were large blocks, each weighing many hundreds of pounds. Roogna tore a few hairs from his rapidly graying head.
"The curse of Murphy again. This will cost us another week. Do I have to lay every block with my own frail hands? Tell them to rip out that course and replace it with the correct one."
The imp scurried off, and the king returned to his task. But just as he was about to work his magic, another imp arrived.
"Hey, King, a goblin army is marching from the south."
Grimly, the king asked, "What is the estimated time of arrival?"
"ETA, 0 minus 10 days.
"That's one shoe,"
the king muttered, and returned to his work. Naturally, the water dragon had wandered out of place, and had to be coaxed laboriously back. Murphy's curse operated in small ways, too. The king was shortly interrupted by yet another imp.
"Roog, old boy, a harpy flight is massing in the north.
ETA?
10 days.
The other shoe," Roogna said resignedly. "The two forces will converge on this spot, courtesy of Murphy. And by the time they have destroyed each other, the landscape will be in ruins and Castle Roogna in rubble. If only we had been able to complete the breastwork in time. But now that is hopeless. My enemy has done some remarkably apt scheming. I am forced to admire it."
"He's a smart man," Dor said. "There must be some way to divert those armies. If they're not really after the castle, I mean, If the goblins and harpies don't care about the castle at all, but only happen to be fighting here? He was disturbed. It didn't seem that his presence had caused this problem, but he wasn't quite sure. If his encounters with the harpies and goblins had set them both off, any direct attempt at diversion would cause them both to attack us, Roogna said. They are extremely intractable creatures. We lack the inclination and means to fend off either of those brute hordes. In your world, man may be the dominant creature, but here, that has not yet been established. If you recruited some more creatures to help you, I would have to dissipate my magic repaying them for that service, instead of working on the castle. Your human army, can't you call it back from furlough? Murphy's curse is especially apt at interfering with organizational messages. I doubt we could summon the full complement back before the monsters arrived. And I'm sure those men need to protect their own homesteads from the advancing monsters. I think it better to defend the castle with what we have on hand. There's a small chance, but as good as the alternative. I fear Murphy has really checked me this time. Maybe another magician could help. Dor interrupted himself with another thought. The zombie master, would his help make the difference? The king considered. Yes, it probably would, because he represents a primary focus of magic, with all its ramifications, and because he is relatively close, with no gap to navigate in getting here, and because his zombies could man the battlements without number or upkeep. The ideal army in this kind of situation. Just feeding my own army during siege would be a terrific problem. We have supplies only for the crews working here now. But this is a useless conjecture. The zombie master does not participate in politics. I have to see him anyway, Dor exclaimed, excited. I could talk to him, explain what is at stake. Hell with caution. If the king was about to lose without Dor's help, why not take the risk? He really could do no harm. Jumper could come along. He's better than I am at lots of things. The worst I could do is fail. The king stroked his beard. There is that. I regard it as a long shot, but since you are willing, tell the zombie master I would be willing to make some reasonable exchange for his assistance. He cocked a finger and another imp appeared. Dor wondered where these imps hid when not in use. The king was evidently well attended, though he made little show of it. Like King Trent, he masked his power except when show was necessary. Prepare an escort and guide for an excursion to the castle of the zombie master. Magician Dor will depart in the morning on a mission for me. But in the morning there was one more, Millie the maid. With the castle delayed and the household staff shipping out during the emergency, I have no job yet, she explained. Maybe I can help. In future centuries, she would be a sad ghost, and come to know the zombie Jonathan, and seek to restore him. She knew nothing of this now, but Dor did. How could he deny her her chance to assist him in this mission, since it was ultimately for her? Maybe in some way she could help. Why did he feel so glad for her company? He knew he could never. She was not. His body appreciated aspects of her that he himself had hardly glimpsed, but she could never be his in that way. So why should he fool himself with impossible notions? Yet how glad he was to be with her, even this brief time. And that is the end of Chapter 5. And
If you are still out there, totally not Caloro Alt. Hello. I know I didn't say hello earlier other than the kind of emoji wave, but I record these so I don't tend to, directly interact with the audience during my Storytime Tuesdays. Take a deep breath and get ready, and then we'll jump into Chapter 6. Hope you guys are all enjoying it so far. Of course, I will have this chapter out on YouTube later today if you missed some of it. And as always, you can catch any of the chapters out on my YouTube, youtube.com/@SirArminius. You can catch any of these prior chapters. But now, let's go ahead and get ourselves into Chapter 6, shall we? Chapter 6, Zombie Master. The escort was a dragon horse, with the front part of a horse and the rear of a dragon. The guide was another imp.
"Well, sport, let's get on with it,"
the imp exclaimed impatiently. He was a good deal larger than Grundy the Golem, but smaller than a goblin, and reminded Dor somewhat of each. There were 3 saddles spaced along the creature's back. Dor took one, Millie another, and Jumper siding to the third, unable to sit on it. The imp perched on the equine head, whispering into the expressive ears. Abruptly, they were moving. The horse forelegs struck the ground powerfully, while the reptilian hind legs dug their claws in and shoved back. The monster half galloped, half slithered forward in great lurches. Millie screamed, and Dor was almost catapulted out of the saddle. The imp chuckled impishly. He had known this would happen. Jumper bounded over Dor's head, landing just behind the girl. With deft motions, the spider trussed her to the saddle with silken threads, so that she could not be dislodged. Then Jumper did the same for Dor. Suddenly, there was no question of being shaken loose. They did not even have to hold on.
You take all the fun out of it,"
the imp complained. The dragon moved rapidly. The lurching smoothed as the creature got up to speed, and became a more or less even rising and falling. Dor closed his eyes and imagined he was on a boat, sailing the waves. Up, down, sway. Up, down, sway. He began to feel seasick and had to open his eyes again. The foliage was rushing past. This creature was really moving. It threaded neatly through seemingly impassable tangles, avoiding tangled trees and monster warrens, hardly abating its pace even for fair-sized rifts. The imp was as obnoxious little man-thing, typical of his kind, spreading insults impartially. But he really knew his route and controlled the dragon expertly. Dor appreciated expertise wherever he found it. Which was not to say the whole trip was smooth. There were hills and dales and curves. Once the dragon splashed through a boggy lake, swimming strongly, but soaking their feet and lower legs in the process. Another time it ascended a steep bank, going almost vertically before cresting it. Once a griffin rose up challengingly before it, squawking. The dragon horse neighed warningly and feinted with its hooves, and the griffin decided to give way. Soon they neared the domain of the zombie master, and Dor realized with a start that this was the same site as that of good magician Humphrey's castle, 800 years later. But maybe that was not strange. That place which seemed fit for one magician might also appeal to another. If Dor were to build a castle someday for himself, he would look for an ideal site, and might be governed by considerations similar to those of some former magician. However, the zombie master had his own defenses.
and these turned out to be as formidable in their fashion as those of Magician Humphrey. A pair of zombies rose up before the dragon horse, and the fearless creature sheered off, unwilling to suffer contact with this rotting flesh. Millie, seeing the zombies, screamed, and even the imp looked disgusted.
"This is as far as we go," the imp announced. "Nothing will bother you here, except zombies. How you get in to talk with their master, I don't even care to know. Dismount and let us go home."
Dor shrugged. Zombies posed no special horror for him, since he had more or less associated with Jonathan all his life. He didn't like zombies, but he wasn't afraid of them. "Very well. Tell the king we are in conference with the zombie master, and will send news soon."
"Fat chance,"
the zombie muttered, or the imp muttered. Dor pretended not to hear that. The three dismounted. Immediately, Dor felt cramps in his legs. That ride had really battered them. Millie stood bow-legged, unable even to kick her feet properly. Only Jumper was unkinked. He had perched atop his saddle throughout, being unable to sit at all. The dragon horse neighed, wheeled on hoof and claw and tail, and shoved off. The three were showered with dirt and twigs thrown up by its feet. It was certainly glad to get away from here. Dor worked the knots out of his legs as well as he could, and limped up to the guard zombies. "We come on a mission from King Roogna. Take us to your master." The zombie opened its ponderous and marble jaws.
"No one passes,"
it declared with fetid breath. Dor concentrated, trying to make out the words. Was his talent operating here? These things were dead, yet fashioned from organic material. Wood was organic, and he could speak to it when it was dead. Did the spell that gave these monsters animation also give them sufficient pseudo-life to nullify his communication with inanimate things? Or was it partially operative? Probably the latter. He could converse, but with difficulty. Jumper chittered. "I believe it said, 'No one passes,'" the web on Dor's shoulder said. Dor glanced at the spider, surprised. Had it come to the point where Jumper could understand Dor's language better than Dor himself could? Jumper chittered again. "Do not be dismayed. All of your words are strange to me. This is merely another aspect of strangeness." Dor smiled. "That makes sense. Very well. You can help me converse with the zombies." He returned his attention to the guards, who had remained as silent as the grave, as patient as time. They had no living urges to impel them. "Tell your master he has visitors. He must see us."
"No,"
the zombie insisted.
"No one."
"Then we shall just have to introduce ourselves." Dor made to pass. The zombie raised a grisly arm to block his way. Shreds of rotten flesh festooned it, and the white bones showed through in places. Millie screamed. She certainly had no affection for any zombie at this stage of her life, but centuries of ghosthood could change a person's perspective, Dor concluded. Dor reached for his sword, but Jumper was there before him, trussing up the zombie in silk. In a moment, the other zombie was similarly incapacitated. Dor had to admit this was the better way. Zombies were messy to slay, he understood, because they could not be killed. They had to be dismembered, and even the pieces fought on, which was one reason they would make such a good army for King Roogna, if that could only be arranged. This way, they were efficiently neutralized, and in a manner that should not offend the zombie master. But they had not gone far toward the castle that stood on a mound in the forest. In Dor's day, both mound and forest were gone, before a zombie serpent challenged them. It hissed and rattled in a fashion only deviously reminiscent of a live serpent, but there was no doubt it sought to bar their progress. Jumper neutralized it as he had the others. Whatever would they have done without the big spider? Then a zombie tangle tree menaced them. This was too much even for the spider. The tree stood 4 times the height of a man, and had perhaps 100 moldering tentacles. Even if it were feasible to truss it up, the thing would have had the strength to snap the strands. Therefore, Dor menaced it with his gleaming sword while the others sidled past. Even a zombie tree had some care for its extremities. In this manner, they achieved the castle. It too was an animated ruin. Stones had fallen from its walls to reveal fossilized inner supporting timbers, and shreds of cloth hung in the window apertures. There had once been a moat, but it had long since filled in with debris. A stench rose from what thick liquid remained. There was, yes, a zombie bog monster languishing in the mire. Its slime-coated orbs focused on the intruders with as much glare as their sunken condition permitted them to mount. The party crossed the broken-down drawbridge and pounded on the sagging door. Splinters and fragments were dislodged, but of course there was no answer. So Dor completed the demolition of the door with a few strokes of his sword, and the 3 marched in, not without a qualm or two.
"Hello!"
Dor called, and his voice reverberated through the tomb-like halls.
"Zombie Master! We are on a mission for the king!"
A zombie ogre appeared. Millie screamed and did a little skip back, her hair swinging almost straight up. She must have kicked her legs, forgetting that she was standing on them. Jumper braced her with one leg to prevent her falling backward into the moat, where the moat monster was trying vainly to slaver.
"No! Go!"
The ogre boomed hollowly, for its chest had been eviscerated by decay. Dor remembered Crunch the ogre and retreated. The zombie ogre was still an ogre. "We must see the zombie master," Millie said, though pale with fear. In her cute way, she too had courage.
"So? Oh!"
The ogre shuffled down a hall, and the party followed. They entered a chamber like a crypt. Another zombie glanced up, resting its cadaverous hands on the table before it. "On what pretext do you intrude here?" it demanded coldly.
"We want to see the zombie master," Dor exclaimed. "Now get out of the way, you bundle of bones, if you're not going to help."
The zombie stared somberly at him. It was an unusually well-preserved specimen, gaunt but not yet rotten. "You have no business with me. You are not yet dead."
"Of course we're not."
Dor paused. That "yet" distracted him. Jumper chittered. "This man is alive. He must be the zombie master himself," Millie finished, horrified. Dor sighed. He had done it again. When would he grow up and learn to check things out before making assumptions? First, King Roogna, whom he had thought to be a gardener. Now the zombie master. He fumbled for an apology. Why do the living seek me?" the zombie master demanded.
King Roogna needs your help," Dor blurted. "And I need the elixir to restore a zombie to life."
"I do not engage in politics," the zombie master said, "and I have no interest in restoring zombies to life. That would undermine my own talent." He made a chill gesture of dismissal and returned to his business, which was the corpse of an antlion that he was evidently about to animate.
"Now see here,"
Dor began angrily, but the zombie ogre stepped forward menacingly, and Dor was cowed. His present body was big and strong and swift, but in no way could it match the least of Ogre's. One swing of that huge fist. Jumper chittered. I think our mission has failed. Dor took another look at the ogre, remembering how Crunch had snapped an ironweed tree off at the base with one careless blow. This creature was not in good condition, being dead, but could probably snap an aluminum wood tree off. Mere human flesh would be no problem at all. So his second thought was much the same as his first. He could not prevail here. Dor turned about. He knew that he could not coerce a magician to help. It had to be voluntary. The zombie master, as the others had warned, was simply not approachable. A hero would have found some way, but Dor was just a lad of 12, accompanied by a giant spider and a girl who screamed constantly and who would become a ghost at an early age. No heroes here. And so he accepted the gall of defeat for both his quests. The gall of growing up, becoming disillusioned. Dor half expected one of the others to protest, as Grundy the Golem always did. But Millie was only a helpless maid, possessing little initiative, and Jumper was not Dor's kind. The spider comprehended human imperatives only imperfectly. They walked out. The zombies did not bother them. They trekked down the hill. The dragon horse was gone, of course. They might have had it wait, but they had not expected to need it this soon. Dor's lack of foresight had penalized him again. Not that delay made much difference at this stage, so they would simply have to march back themselves. They untied the 2 zombie guards Jumper had trussed in silk. Nothing personal, Dor explained to them. Our business with your master is finished. They marched. Millie made a very pretty marcher when she wasn't screaming or kicking her feet. Her hair still flung about naturally. He was getting used to her as she was now, and found her rather intriguing. In fact, he wouldn't mind, but that wouldn't be right. He had to guard against the thoughts his mundane body put into his head. Mundanes weren't very subtle. Abruptly, they happened on a campfire. This was strange because fire was hardly used in the land of Xanth. Few things needed cooking, and heat was more efficiently obtained by pouring a little fire water on whatever needed warming. But this was obviously an organized fire, with sticks formed into a circular pile. The flames licked merrily up through the center. Someone had been here recently. In fact, the person must have departed moments before Dor and his party arrived. Stand where you are, stranger, a voice called from the shadow. I've got you covered with a bow. Billy screamed. Dor reached for his sword, then stopped. He couldn't draw before an arrow struck him. No sense in compounding his yet again lack of foresight by getting himself unnecessarily killed. Jumper jumped straight up and disappeared into the foliage of a tree overhanging them. The challenger stepped forth. He was a brutish man, mundane by the look of him, and he had not been bluffing about the bow. The string was taut, and the arrow knocked and centered on Dor's midsection. Knowing the capabilities of his own mundane body, Dor had little reason to doubt the competence of this challenger. It seemed as if all mundanes were born warriors. Perhaps this was in compensation for their abysmal lack of magic. Or maybe the soft, gentle, peaceful mundanes didn't go out invading other lands. Who the hell are you, poking 'em round my campfire? The brute demanded. What happened to that creep with you? The hairy things with the legs. I am Dor, on mission for the king, Dor said. He spoke more boldly than was his wont, fresh from the pain of failure on his missions. The others are my companions. Who are you to challenge me thusly? So, you're a Xanthi, the man exclaimed sneeringly. You sure could have fooled me. You look just like a man. You try a spell on me, and I'll drill you. So, this really was a mundane. Dor had never seen one in the flesh before. You don't have a talent? Don't get smart with me, creep. Then the man looked at him more closely. Say, you're even dressed like one of us. You sure you're not a deserter? Would you like to see my talent? Dor asked evenly. The man considered. Yeah, in a moment, but no tricks. He turned his head and yelled, Hey, Joe! Come and set guard on a pair here. Joe arrived. He was another brutish man, unclean and malodorous.
What's all this noise about?
He broke off. His lips pursed in a crude whistle.
Get a load of that, babe.
Oops, Dor thought. Millie's talent was operating. Millie made a token scream and stepped back. Joe stepped forward aggressively.
Boy, I could really use a number like this.
His hand shot out, catching her slender arm. This time Millie's scream was in earnest. Dor's body took over. His left hand grabbed at the first mundane's bow, while his right snapped over his shoulder to whip out the sword. Suddenly, the two mundanes were standing at bay.
Leave her be,
Dor cried. Millie turned on him, surprised and gratified. Why, Dor, I didn't know you cared. I didn't know either, he murmured. He knew it was a lie. He had resolved to stop lying, but it seemed to come naturally at times like these. Was that part of growing up too? Learning to lie socially? He had always cared for Millie, but had never known how to express it. Only the immediate threat to her had prompted his action.
You won't get away with this,
Joe said angrily.
We've got troops all around here, looking for plunder.
Dor spoke to the club that dangled from the man's waist. Is that true, club? It's true, the club said. This is the advanced unit of the mundane fifth wave. They marched down the coast past the gap, then cut inland. They are completely immune to reason. All they want is wealth and women and easy living. In that order. Flee whilst you can. The first mundane's mouth dropped open. Magic. He's really got magic. Dor backed away, Millie beside him. This was a tactical error. For the moment the two mundanes were beyond sword-slash range, they drew their own weapons and set up a shout. Enemy escaping! Cut him off! A shade dropped from above. Jumper. He landed almost on top of the two mundanes and trussed them up before they knew what was happening. But the alarm had already been given, and there were sounds all around of men closing in. We had better use the upper reaches, Jumper chittered. The mundanes will not pursue us there. But they can shoot their arrows at us, Dor protested. They may not see us. Jumper fastened safety lines to Dor and Millie, and they scrambled up the trunk of a tree. The mundanes were arriving. These alien men were worse than goblins. Dor was climbing rapidly, thanks to his body's huge muscles, but Millie was slow. She would certainly be caught. I will distract them, Jumper chittered, and dropped low on his dragline. Dor waited for Millie to catch up with him, then continued on up into the foliage. Just as they got to some reasonable cover, the mundanes converged on the tree. Jumper chittered at them, swinging across to another tree.
Get that bug,
a mundane cried. He lunged for Jumper, but missed as the spider zipped a few feet up his line. Jumper could have escaped them by going on up into the heights, or simply jumping over the mundanes and running. But Dor was still struggling to haul Millie to safety. So the heroic spider dangled low, chittering in a manner that sounded challenging and insulting even without translation. Another mundane lunged and missed. Mundanes just didn't think of an enemy rising suddenly up. But there were too many. Now the spider had nowhere to go. One mundane had the wit to chop at the dragline with a sword, severing the invisible silk. Jumper dropped to the ground. Instantly the men pounced on him, grabbing him one man to a leg, much as the goblins had, so that he was helpless. Men and goblins. Was there really much difference between them? The mundanes were bigger, but... Dor was about to turn back to aid his friend, but one of Jumper's 8 eyes spied him. "Don't waste my effort," he chittered, knowing that no one besides Dor could understand him. "Return to the Zombie Master. It is the only place you can keep the girls safe." Dor hadn't thought of that. The Zombie Master might not be friendly, but at least he was not too hostile. It was the best place to be until the mundane horde passed. He climbed up into the protective splay of leaves, urging Millie on. His last sight of Jumper was of the men bearing him to the ground, striking his soft body brutally with their fists. They weren't trying to kill, they were trying to hurt, to make their enemies suffer as long as possible before the end. Because Jumper had balked them from capturing the girl, and because Jumper was different. Dor winced, feeling the pain of the blows in his own gut. What would happen? What would they do to his friend? Jumper had left a network of silken lines strung through the upper foliage, guiding Dor and Millie and providing rapid transit from one great tree to another. It was amazing how much he had accomplished in the brief time he had been aloft, and with what foresight. Dor had never thought his friend was deserting him, but neither had he anticipated the sacrifice Jumper would make. He felt the unmanly tears stinging his eyes, was afraid Millie would notice them, then decided he didn't care. Jumper. To have Jumper trapped like this, perhaps badly hurt, because of Dor's own carelessness. Abruptly, there was a piercing, terrible, great chittering from below. It translated into a sheer scream of agony, chilling in its implication. "They are pulling off his legs," Millie whispered in horror. "That's what mundanes do to spiders. The wings off butterflies." Dor saw that her beautiful face was streaked with helpless tears. She was not ashamed to cry. Then something congealed in Dor. "Come on," he snapped, and swung forward at a faster pace. "Don't you care that—" she demanded plaintively.
Hurry!
Reproachfully, she hurried. Dor felt like a heel from a #1 shoe tree, knowing she thought concern for his own safety motivated him. But he wasted no effort trying to explain. Jumper had 8 legs. It would take the mundanes time to get them all, and he had to use that time well. In moments they ran out of Jumper's lines and dropped to the ground. They were now at the base of the hill on which the Zombie Master's castle sat. A zombie rose up to challenge them, but Dor shoved it aside so roughly that it collapsed in a jumble of shredded meat and chipped bone. He dragged Millie on. They never paused at the chopped-open castle door. Dor charged right in. The zombie ogre rose up. Dor parried it with his blade, ducked under its arm, and plunged on through the gloomy hall. At last he burst into the Zombie Master's chamber, where the zombie antlion was now taking its first steps. "Magician!" Dor cried. "You must save my friend the spider. The mundanes are pulling out his legs." The Zombie Master shook his cadaverous head and waved with an emaciated hand. "I have no interest in—" Dor menaced him with his sword. "If you do not help this instant,
I will surely slay you." Such was his hurt and desperation, he was not bluffing, though he feared the magician could turn him into a zombie. Now the zombie master showed some spirit. "So you, a mortal, dare threaten a magician?" "I am a magician too," Dor cried. "But even if I weren't, I would do anything to save my friend, who sacrificed himself for me and Millie." Millie put a restraining hand on Dor's arm. "Please," she said, "you cannot threaten a magician. Let me handle it, Dor. I am not a magician like you, but I do have my talent." Dor paused, and Millie stepped close to the zombie master, smiling with difficulty. "Sir, I am not a forward maid, and no sorceress, but I too would do anything to help the bold friend who preserved us. If you but knew Jumper the Spider, please. Now, if you have any compassion at all." The magician looked at her closely for the first time. Dor remembered what her talent was, and knew how it softened men. He was just beginning to appreciate its impact on himself. The zombie master was, after all, a man, and he too had to feel the impact. "You will tarry with me?" he asked incredulously. Dor did not like the sound of that word, tarry. Millie spread her arms toward the zombie master. "Save my friend. What becomes of me is not important." A kind of shudder ran through the magician. "This becomes you not, maid," he said. "Yet," he turned to his ogre, "gather my forces, Igor. Go with this man and do as he desires. Save the spider." Dor took off, running through the gloomy halls and from the castle. The true horror was what lay ahead of him. The zombie ogre followed, crying out to the things of the castle, "Some, come!" Zombies erupted from the adjacent rooms, in their haste dripping stray clods, bones, and teeth. They closed in behind the ogre, men, wolves, bats, and other creatures too far gone to identify. In grisly procession, they followed Dor down the hill. His concern for his friend lent him swiftness, and somehow the zombies kept up. Yet even as he ran, Dor wondered whether he had not left Millie to as bad a fate as the one he strove to rescue Jumper from. The spider had sacrificed himself to save the two of them. Millie had sacrificed herself to save the spider. The full nature of Millie's talent had never been apparent to him, though it was becoming clearer. It included holding and kissing, and his mind balked. Kissing the zombie master? He ran faster. They burst upon the mundanes. The first thing Dor saw was Jumper. The brutal men had hung him up by 4 legs and yanked off the other 4. The spider was alive, but in terrible pain after this torture. Dor went mad. "Kill!" he screamed, and his sword was in his hand. Almost of its own volition, the blade chopped into the neck of the mundane nearest Jumper, the one holding the spider leg that had been torn off most recently. Dor was reminded of the centipede leg spat out at the goblin banquet. But this was his friend. The keen edge sliced through the flesh with surprising ease. It passed right through the neck, and the man's head popped off. Dor stared, momentarily numb to the implication. Then he looked again at the severed leg and whirled on the next mundane. Meanwhile, the zombies were attacking with a will. The mundanes panicked, becoming aware of the horror that had fallen on them. Dor had heard that mundanes were a superstitious lot. Zombies should play on that propensity. The men scattered, and in a moment there was nothing in the glade except the victors
3 bodies, and Jumper. Dor couldn't let himself relax. "Carry the spider to the castle," he ordered the ogre. "Carefully." He turned to the other zombies. "Collect the severed legs and bring them along." Would it be possible to convert them into usable zombie legs and put them back on the spider? The ogre picked up the mutilated body. Other zombies found the missing legs and dragged along the dead mundanes. The strength of the zombies was surprising, or maybe it was just willpower. They brought their prizes grimly to the castle. Millie met them at the entrance. She looked all right. Her clothes were still on, and her hair was unmussed. Dor had trouble phrasing his question. Did he...
"The zombie master was a perfect gentleman," she said brightly. "We just talked. He's an educated man. I think he's lonely. No one ever visited with him before."
And no wonder. Dor's attention returned to Jumper. "He's alive, but in terrible pain. They pulled off 4 legs.
"The brutes!"
she exclaimed with feeling. She had seemed a rather innocent, helpless maid before, but now she was reacting to stress and horror with increasing personality.
"How can we help him?"
Jumper revived enough to chitter weakly.
"Only time will help me. Time to regrow my lost limbs. A month or so."
"But I must return to the king in mere days," Dor cried, "and to my own land."
"Return without me. Perhaps I can render some service to the zombie master in return for his hospitality."
"But I must take the zombie master with me to help the king." Yet that too was an impasse. The magician had already refused to get involved in politics. The zombie master was there. In his distraction, Dor had not been aware of his arrival. Why did the men torment the spider?
"I am alien to this world,"
Jumper chittered.
"I am a natural creature, but in my enchantment in this realm of men, I become a thing of horror. Only these friends who know me..."
His chittering ceased abruptly. He was unconscious. A thing of horror, yet with sentience and courage. The zombie master murmured thoughtfully. He looked up. "I will care for this creature as long as he requires it. Igor, carry him up to the guest chamber." The ogre picked Jumper up again and tromped away. "I wish there were some way to cure him faster," Dor said. "Some medicinal spell, like the healing elixir." He snapped his fingers. "That's it! I know where there's a healing spring, within a day's journey of here." Now he had the magician's attention. "I could use such an elixir in my art," the zombie master exclaimed. "I will help you fetch it, if you will share the precious fluid with me." "There's plenty," Dor agreed. "Only there's one catch. You can't act against the interest of the healing spring, or you forfeit its benefit." "A fair stipulation." The zombie master showed the way to an inner courtyard. A monstrous zombie bird roosted there. Dor stared. This was a roc, the largest of all birds, restored to pseudo-life by the talent of this magician. The entire world of the dead was under the power of this man. "Carry this man where he will," the zombie master directed the roc. "Return him safely, with his burden, to this spot." I'll need a jug or something." Dor said. The magician produced 2 jugs, one for each of them. Dor climbed onto the stinking back of the rock, anchored himself by grasping the rotting stubs of 2 great feathers, and tied the jugs with a length of jumper's silk left over from his last dragline. The rock flapped its monstrous wings. The spread was so great, the tips touched the castle walls on either side of the courtyard. Grimy feathers flew wide, bits of meat sprayed off, and the bony substructure crackled alarmingly. But there was tremendous power remaining in this creature. A rock in its prime could carry an elephant. That was an imaginary creature the size of a small sphinx. And Dor weighed far less than that, so even this animated corpse could perform credibly enough. They lumbered into the air, barely clearing the castle roof. There were so many holes in the great wings that Dor marveled that they did not fall apart, let alone have sufficient leverage to make flight possible. But the spell of the zombie master was a wondrous thing. No zombie ever quite disintegrated, though all of them seemed perpetually on the verge of doing so. They looped above the castle. "Go east!" Dor cried. He hoped he knew the terrain well enough by air to locate the spot. He tried to visualize a tapestry to orient himself. Was he actually flying above it now? But this world was too real for that. Dor had only been to the healing spring once with his father, Bink, who had needed elixir for some obscure adult purpose. On that trip, Bink had reminisced about his adventures there. How he had met Dor's mother, Chameleon, she being then in the guise of Dee, her normal phase, at such and such a spot, and how he had found the soldier Crombie at this other spot, wounded, and used the elixir to restore him to health. Dor and Bink had visited briefly with a dryad, a wood nymph associated with a particular tree, resembling a pretty girl of about Millie's present age. She had tousled Dor's hair and wished him well. Ah, yes, it had been a fine trip. But now, high in the air, Dor could not ask the objects on the ground where the spring was, and there were no clouds close enough to hail. Hail call, that is, not hailstone, and his memory seemed fallible. Then he spied a channel of especially healthy jungle, obviously benefiting from the flowing water from the spring. "Down there," he cried, "at the head of that stream." The zombie rock dropped like a stone, righted itself, glided in for a landing, tilted a little, and clipped a tree with one far-reaching wingtip. Immediately the wing crumpled, and the rock's whole body swerved out of control. It was a crash landing that sent Dor tumbling from his perch. He picked himself up, bruised but intact. The rock was a wreck. Both wings had been broken. There was no way the creature could fly now. How was he to get back in time to do Jumper much good? If he walked, it would take him a day in the best of conditions. Carrying 2 heavy jugs, it would be longer, assuming he didn't get snapped up by a tangle tree, dragon, or other monster along the way. He reconnoitered. They had missed a spring, but there was a handsome tree nearby on the hillside, and he recognized it. "Dryad!" he cried, running toward it. "Remember me? Dor?" There was no response. Suddenly he realized. This was 800 years earlier. The Dryad would not remember him. In fact, there probably was no Dryad here yet, and this was probably not the same tree. Even if the time had been correct, the nymph still would hardly have recognized him in his present body. He had been boyishly foolish, yet again. Disconsolately, he trekked down the slope. Of course this was not the same tree. The real one had been some distance from the spring, not right beside it.
And an average tree of today would be an extraordinary tree by Dor's own time. Even plants aged considerably in 8 centuries. His hopes had really fouled up his thinking. He would have to find his own way out of this mess, without help from any dryad. Well, not entirely without help. "What is the best route out of here?" he asked the nearest stone. "Ride that rock bird out," the rock replied. "But the rock's wings are broken." "So sprinkle it with some elixir, idiot." Dor stopped dead in his tracks. So obvious. "I am an idiot," he exclaimed. "That's what I said," the stone agreed smugly. Dor ran up to the rock, got his jugs, and ran to the spring. "Mind if I take some of your elixir?" he inquired rhetorically. "Yes, I mind," the spring replied. "All you creatures come and steal my substance that I labor so hard to enchant. And what recompense do I get for it?" "What recompense?" Dor retorted. "You demand the stiffest price of all." "What are you talking about? I never made any demands." Something was wrong. Then Dor caught on. Again, that 800-year factor. The spring had not yet developed its compensatory enchantment. Well, maybe Dor could do it a favor. "Look, Spring, I intend to pay you for your substance. Give me these 2 jugs full of elixir, and I will tell you how to get fair recompense from all other takers." "Done!" the spring cried. Dor dipped the jugs full, noting how the bruises vanished from his body as he touched the water. This was the spring, all right. "All you need is supplementary enchantment, requiring that anyone who benefits from your elixir cannot thereafter act against your interests. The more your water is used, the more your power will grow." "But suppose someone calls my bluff?" "It will be no bluff. You will take back your magic. It will be as if he never was healed by you." "Say, yes, I could do that," the spring said excitedly. "It would take a while, maybe a few centuries, to build that extra spell. But since it's just a refinement of the original magic, a termination clause, as it were, yes, it will work." "Oh, thank you, stranger." "I told you I would repay you," Dor said, gratified. Then he thought of something else. I'm only a visitor to this land, and what I do may fade out after I leave. So you'd better get right on that spell, so you don't lose it once I'm gone."
"How long do I have?"
Dor did a quick calculation. "Maybe 10 days?"
"I'll fix it in my mind," the spring said. "I'll memorize it so hard that nothing can shake it loose."
"That's good," Dor said. "Farewell."
"I'm not a well, I'm a spring."
But it was a good-natured correction. "Maybe you're a wellspring," Dor suggested, "because you make creatures well again."
"Bye,"
the spring said, dismissing him. Dor returned to the rock and sprinkled elixir from his jar on its wings. Immediately they healed. In fact, they were better than they had been. But they remained zombie wings, dead flesh. There were, after all, limits. The elixir could not restore the dead to life. which was why he was on this quest. Only the zombie master could do what needed to be done. Meanwhile, he had to get back to Jumper soon, lest the spider also require restoration from the dead. Door boarded, tied the jugs, and hung on. "Home, Rock!" he cried. The rock taxied about to face the channel forged by its crash landing, worked its legs to accelerate, flapped its wings, and launched violently into the air. This takeoff was far more precipitous than the first one had been. It was all Door could do to hang on. The elixir had given the wings new power. Fortunately, there were a few droplets remaining on his hands, and these healed the feathers to which he clung. Now they were great, long, fluffy, colorful puffs of plumage, suitable for ladies' hats, easy to grasp. The rock wheeled in the sky, then stroked powerfully for the zombie master's castle. The landscape fairly whizzed by now. They reached their destination half the time it had taken to make the outbound trip. No wonder the magician wanted the elixir. His zombies would be twice as good now. But a new problem manifested. From above, Door could see that the mundanes had rallied, and now were laying siege to the castle. There were many of them. Their whole advance army must have gathered for this effort. They evidently were not cowards. They had been panicked by the ferocity of the zombies' attack, but now they were angry at the 3 deaths and sought revenge. Also, they probably thought that any castle so well guarded must conceal enormous riches, so their greed had been invoked. In helping his friend Jumper, Door had brought serious mischief to the zombie master. Door was sure his father would have had more sense than that. It was yet another reminder of his own youth and inexperience and thoughtlessness. When, oh when, would he grow up and be adult? The rock dived, hawk-like, banked, and plopped into place in the courtyard. The landing was heavy, for the bird's feet had not been healed. The sound carried throughout the castle. The zombie master and Millie rushed up. "You got it!" Millie cried, clapping her hands. "I got it," Door agreed. He handed one jug to the magician, keeping the other for himself. "Take me to Jumper." Millie guided him to the guest room. The big spider lay there, ichor leaking from his stumps. The variegated fur face on the back of his abdomen seemed to be making a grimace of distress. His eyes, always open, were filmed with pain. He was conscious again, but so weak he could chitter only faintly. "Good to see you again, friend. I fear the injuries have been too extensive. Legs can be regrown, but internal organs have been crushed too. I cannot." "Yes, you can, friend," Door cried. "Take that!" And he poured a liberal dose of elixir over Jumper's shuddering body. Like magic, unsurprisingly, the spider was whole again. As the liquid coursed over the fur face, the green and white and black brightened until they shone. As it touched each stump, the legs sprouted out, long and hairy and strong. As it was absorbed, the internal organs were restored, and the body firmed out. In a moment, there was no sign that Jumper had ever been injured. "It is amazing," he chittered. "I did not even need to have my original legs returned. I have not felt so good since I was hatched. What is this medicine?" "Healing elixir," Door explained. "I knew where there was a spring of it." He broke off, overcome by emotion. "Oh, Jumper, if you had died?" And he embraced the spider as well as he could, the tears once more overflowing his eyes. To hell with being adult. "I think it was worth the torture," Jumper chittered, one mandible moving against Door's ear. "Watch I don't nib your antenna off." "Go ahead," I have plenty more healing elixir to use to grow a new ear.
Besides which, Millie added, human flesh tastes awful. Maybe even worse than goblin meat.
The zombie master had followed them. You are human, yet you hold this alien creature in such esteem. You cry for him, he remarked.
And what's wrong with that?
Millie demanded. Nothing, the magician said wanly. Absolutely nothing. No one ever cried for me. Even in the height of his relief, Dor perceived the meaning of the zombie master's words. The man had been alienated from his own kind by the nature of his magic, rendered a pariah. He identified with Jumper, another alien. That was why he had agreed to take care of Jumper. More than anything else, the magician must want people to care for him the way Dor and Millie cared for Jumper. Will you help King Roogna? Dor asked, disengaging from his friend. I do not engage in politics, the zombie master said, the coldness returning. Because the king was no pariah. This magician might assist those who showed him some human compassion, but King Roogna had not done that. Would you at least come to meet the king, to talk with him? If you helped him, he would see that you received due honor. Honor by that? Never. Dor found he could not argue with that. He would not have wanted that sort of honor either. If there was such a thing as dishonorable honor, that would be it. He had made another stupid error of approach and squelched his chances. Again. Some emissary he was proving to be. But there was another problem. You know the mundanes of the fifth wave are getting ready to attack this castle. I do know, the zombie master agreed. My zombie eye flies report that there are hundreds of them, too many to overcome with my present force. I have sent the rock out to round up more bodies to shore up my defenses. To facilitate this, the rock will not even land here at the castle. It will drop bodies in the courtyard and proceed immediately for more. The mundanes are mad at us, Dor said, because we killed 3 of them. Maybe if we leave. My zombies helped you, the zombie master pointed out. You gain nothing other than your own demise by departing now. The mundanes have this castle surrounded. To them, it is a repository of unguessable riches. No reasonable demurral will change their fixed minds. Maybe if they saw us leave, Dor said, the rock could carry us out. Oh, the rock's away for the duration. It seems we must remain, at least for a time, Jumper chittered. Maybe we can assist in the defense of the castle. Yes, we'd better, Dor agreed, since we seem to have brought this siege down upon it. Then, for no reason, he found himself making another appeal. Magician, will you reconsider the matter of the zombie restorative elixir? This is not a political matter, and... The zombie master glanced at him coldly. Before the magician could speak, Millie put her sweet little hand on his lean arm. Please? She breathed. She was excruciatingly attractive when she breathed that way. Yet she could not know that it was as a favor to herself, of 800 years later, that Dor was obtaining this precious substance. The zombie master's coldness faded. Since she asks, and you are a good and loyal man, I do reconsider. I will develop the agent you require. But it was evident that most of the responsibility for his change of heart was Millie's, and her breathing. Dor knew victory of a sort, yet it was incomplete. He was succeeding in his private personal mission, while failing in his mission for the king.
Was that right? He didn't know, but had to take what he could. Thank you, magician, he said humbly. And we have reached the end of chapter 6. And hello, Tronus. Good to see you. So, if you've been listening and watching my videos on YouTube, how have you missed all of the Xanth novels? Have you not been, checking out my live videos for my story times on Tuesdays? These are the videos from every Tuesday. You can check them all out here. youtube.com/@SirArminius. All of so the reason I don't engage verbally while I am actually reading the chapters is because I record all of these and put up each of the chapters on my YouTube. If you look for any of the stuff that's actually under my live reading playlists, you should actually be able to find this is the third of the Xanth novels. And so like Door is actually a 12-year-old magician in a man's body here, and his magical ability is that he can I see. Is that he can speak with inanimate objects. Anything that is not living, he can speak with. So, rocks and swords and cobwebs and things like that, clothes, gems, anything that is inanimate, he can speak with. So when you heard him go and speak to the rock or to the healing spring, that was how he could speak with them, because that was how he could be able to do that. So in the land of Xanth, no magical talent ever duplicates itself. They can be close, but they're never duplicative. So he has this magic ability, but nobody else does. So nobody else can ever talk to inanimate objects the way that he does. And so the idea is that they can notice things and they can have an idea of what's going on, but they would never have had the ability to speak to anybody to tell them about any of it. And so he, on the other hand, can speak to the inanimate. So when he goes up and he asks, basically so he can speak to any inanimate object. There may be a person who could speak to rocks, but maybe only to rocks, or maybe only to igneous rocks, or like you may like I said, you could have a similar talent, but not an exact same talent. He is magician level because he can speak to any inanimate object. Well, somebody else may be able to speak specifically to like a type of a rock or two rocks, but he can't speak to a metal object or things like that. So it's where, and that is where Door is considered to be magician level, because he can speak to anything inanimate. But everybody born in the land of Xanth has some kind of a magical talent, and it's the degree of that magical talent that basically gives them their status within the land. So you'll get some people who will have basically useless magic, of the kind where, like, I could take and put a yellow spot on a wall. That's my magic talent. Nobody else can take and put a yellow spot on a wall. Maybe the person next to me can put a green spot on a wall, or a green-yellow spot on a wall, or an oval spot rather than a circular spot. And hello, TV test pattern. And so it's very Xanth is interesting that way, in that, like I said, no, the magical talents are never duplicative, but they can be close. They can be similar
will not be the exact same. But again, book 1, book 2, and up through chapter 6 of book 3 will be up on my YouTube by end of the night tonight. Up through chapter 4 is up there right now, youtube.com/@SirArminius. And I will have 5 and 6 put up there before tonight is out. Because every Tuesday I read two chapters, and then I will take the recordings of those chapters and they go up on YouTube. So, the Xanth series by Piers Anthony. Piers Anthony, of course, a very well known author in the fantasy genre. Science fiction, fantasy, things like that. I want to say there's 37 books in the Xanth series or something like that. I started reading these as a kid. I want to say the first of them came out in like the later 70s. And so these have been around for quite a long time. And so I read these as a kid. And part of what I've been doing on my story time Tuesdays is looking for books that exist out there that are great series that don't necessarily exist out there in actually 47 books in the Xanth series. 47 with a quick Google search to Wikipedia. That don't necessarily have audiobooks that you can go get on like, you know, the major services and stuff like that. And so I've been using these as ways to be able to hone my craft and to be able to put out here something that hopefully people are interested in. But on that note, we are at the end of my stream for this evening. So I want to say thank you to all of you for coming along to join me this evening. I will be back again tomorrow with some Pathfinder. I believe, are back to Abomination Vaults tomorrow. And then Thursday, I will be back with some Mech Warrior Online for Stompy Mech Night. Oh, yes. Yeah, I do 2 of these chapters, Tronus, each Tuesday, and then I post them up so that way I've got a consistent flow of these things going. So it is the end of my evening for this. Thank you, thank you. A healthy night to you as well, because I know it is much later in your evening. Yes, so Xanth is its own thing, definitely. So I will see you guys all a little bit later this week. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you guys all again really soon. Good night, all.